The FBI just released over 600 pages of documents about Elvis Presley, and what they reveal about Graceland is not what anyone expected. For decades, the King's Mansion stood as a monument to rock and roll royalty, but behind those famous musical note gates, federal investigators uncovered something that would shake the Presley legacy to its core. When 22-year-old Elvis Presley purchased Graceland in March 1957 for $102,500, he wasn't just buying a house. He was claiming his kingdom. The Colonial Revival Mansion, on what would become Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis, Tennessee, sat on nearly 14 acres of land, far enough from downtown to escape the screaming fans, but close enough to remain connected to the city that made him famous. The estate got its name from Grace Tawaf, the original owner's daughter. Ruth and Thomas Moore had commissioned the construction back in 1939, creating a sprawling 10,000-square-foot mansion. But Elvis had bigger plans. Over the years, he transformed the property from a stately southern home into something uniquely his own, expanding it to over 17,000 square feet with 23 rooms. Walk through those gates today, and you'll find yourself in a time capsule. The Jungle Room, added in the 1960s during one of Elvis's renovation projects, features green shag carpeting climbing up the walls, Polynesian-inspired furniture with exotic carved wood, and a waterfall. Elvis stumbled upon the furnishings at a Memphis furniture store in 1974 and bought everything on the spot. The room became a family favorite, reminding him of Hawaii, a place where he could briefly escape the pressures of fame. Then there's the TV room, tiled in black and yellow, with 3 television sets mounted in the wall. Elvis wanted to watch all 3 major networks simultaneously. The meditation garden, designed by Bernard Grenadier, became his thinking space, where he would sit alone at night reflecting on life, career, and everything that came with being the most famous man in America. But Graceland held darker secrets too. On August 16, 1977, Elvis's fiancée Ginger Alden found him face down on his bathroom floor around 2:30 in the afternoon. He was 42 years old. The initial reports claimed a heart attack. Natural causes, for a man who had pushed himself too hard for too long. But when the toxicology reports came back weeks later, they painted a drastically different picture. 14 drugs were found in Elvis's system, 10 of them present in significant quantities. The list read like a pharmacy inventory: Dilaudid, Quaalude, Percodan, Demerol, codeine at 10 times the therapeutic level, methaqualone in toxic amounts, morphine, meperidine, ethchlorvanol, diazepam, and several barbiturates. The codeine alone was 30 times higher than any recommended dose. His personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, had prescribed over 10,000 doses of sedatives, amphetamines, and narcotics in Elvis's name during just the first 8 months of 1977. His medicine cabinet at Graceland was filled with amber-colored vials topped with white caps, containing medications in doses no responsible doctor should have ever authorized. Here's where it gets complicated. Elvis wasn't just an addict making poor choices. Medical experts now believe he was suffering from multiple undiagnosed conditions that his doctors completely missed. Forensic pathologist Michael Baden later stated that Elvis had an enlarged heart for years, combined with disease processes affecting his stomach, liver, spine, and eyes. Some researchers believe he had a progressive autoimmune inflammatory disorder that went completely unrecognized. The turning point might have been 1967. Elvis tripped over a television cord and knocked himself unconscious on a bathtub. Dr. Nick diagnosed him with post-concussion syndrome and later said Elvis was never the same after that injury. Some medical experts theorize the head trauma was so severe it caused brain tissue to dislodge and enter his bloodstream, triggering a cascade of health problems that would plague him for the remaining decade of his life. By 1973, he was hospitalized for addiction and overdosed twice on barbiturates in the same year. His weight ballooned. He developed glaucoma, liver damage, and high blood pressure. The man who had once commanded stages with effortless charisma was falling apart, and the evidence was scattered throughout Graceland. But the real FBI involvement with Graceland would not come until much later, and it had nothing to do with Elvis's death. What federal investigators eventually uncovered at the mansion involved fraud and an audacious scheme that nearly cost the Presley family everything they had fought to preserve. The story begins with Elvis's daughter Lisa Marie, her sudden death in January 12, 2023, and a foreclosure notice that shocked the world. The documents the FBI collected tell a story that goes far beyond prescription pills and tragic endings. They reveal how someone tried to steal American history itself. Lisa Marie Presley died on January 12, 2023. She died of cardiac arrest at her Calabasas home. She was 54 years old, leaving behind 4 children and an estate worth significantly less than anyone imagined. Her eldest daughter, Riley Keough, inherited Graceland through the Presley Family Trust. At 33, Riley was already an established actress, known for her own work, not just her grandfather's shadow. She understood what Graceland represented, not just a house, but a pilgrimage site for millions who still mourned the king. For a few months, everything seemed stable. Tours continued. Visitors walked through the jungle room and gazed at the meditation garden where Elvis, Lisa Marie, and Benjamin Keough all rested. Riley worked quietly behind the scenes, making plans for exhibits and coordinating with the estate managers. Then the foreclosure notice appeared. In early 2024, a local Memphis newspaper published something that made absolutely no sense. Graceland was being foreclosed on. The claim stated that Lisa Marie had taken out a $3.8 million loan from a company called Unmasking Investments and Private Lending. She had allegedly used Graceland itself as collateral. The loan went unpaid. Now the property would be auctioned to the highest bidder. The announcement sent shockwaves through Memphis and beyond. How could this happen? Graceland was not just valuable, it was sacred. Over 600,000 people visited annually, making it the second most visited private residence in the United States after the White House. It had been designated a National Historic Landmark in 2006. The idea that it could simply be seized and sold felt impossible. Riley's reaction was immediate and forceful. She had never heard of this loan. Her mother had financial troubles, absolutely, but Lisa Marie would never have risked Graceland. The documents had to be fake. Her legal team began digging. Within days, red flags emerged everywhere. Unmasking Investments had virtually no online presence, no regulatory filings, and no business history anyone could verify. The loan documents themselves looked professional at first glance, but closer examination revealed inconsistencies. Lisa Marie's signature did not match known examples. Notary stamps appeared irregular. Dates did not align with her known whereabouts. Riley filed an emergency petition to halt the foreclosure. Her attorneys argued the entire thing was fraudulent, constructed by someone hoping to exploit the chaos following Lisa Marie's sudden death. The court agreed to pause the sale while investigators looked deeper. That's when the FBI got involved. Federal wire fraud, forged documents crossing state lines, and identity theft of a deceased person. This was no longer just civil litigation. This was criminal. Agents began tracing Unmasking Investments backward through layers of fake addresses and shell entities. Every lead dissolved into another dead end. Whoever created this company knew how to cover tracks, but they had made mistakes, small ones. Digital footprints that could not be completely erased. The investigation eventually led to Missouri. A 53-year-old woman named Lisa Jeanine Findley had a history of fraud convictions and forgery charges. She had worked as a notary before losing her license, giving her just enough knowledge of legal documents to create convincing fakes. Her past schemes had targeted smaller estates and businesses. Nothing approached the scale of Graceland. What made her think she could pull this off? Desperation, probably, or delusion. Maybe both. She had created multiple identities over the years, using different names to file paperwork, send correspondence, and create the illusion of a legitimate lending operation. For Graceland, she went further than ever before, fabricating an entire financial history that supposedly stretched back years. When federal agents arrested her, the evidence was overwhelming. She had forged Lisa Marie's signature on loan documents, created false promissory notes, and filed fraudulent foreclosure notices with local courts. She had even impersonated representatives of the fake lending company, sending threatening letters to Riley's legal team demanding payment. During questioning, Findley admitted everything. She had fabricated the loan, forged the signatures, and invented the entire debt. Her plan was shockingly simple: create enough legal confusion to force a quick sale, then disappear with whatever proceeds she could extract before anyone realized what had happened. She had targeted Graceland specifically because Lisa Marie's recent death created a window of vulnerability. Estate transitions are messy. Documents get lost. Heirs are grieving, not scrutinizing every financial claim. What she had not counted on was Riley's refusal to accept the story, how quickly experts would spot the forgeries, or that the FBI would move so aggressively once they understood the scope. But the investigation did not stop with Findley's arrest, because federal agents had a question nobody could answer. How did she know so much about Graceland's internal operations, about the estate's financial vulnerabilities, about the exact moment to strike? Someone with that level of detailed knowledge suggested something more disturbing: access. Either she had help from inside, or she had found another way in. That question led investigators back to Graceland itself. Riley made a decision that shocked everyone involved. She granted federal agents unrestricted access to the entire property, including areas that had been sealed since Elvis died in 1977. The second floor, Elvis's private quarters, rooms that had not been open to outsiders in nearly 5 decades. The decision was not made lightly. Those rooms represented sacred ground for the Presley family, preserved exactly as Elvis left them. But Riley understood something crucial. If there were answers about how Findley gained her detailed knowledge, they might be hidden somewhere in that house. Federal agents entered Graceland on a gray morning in late spring. They moved methodically through the mansion, starting with public areas before ascending the famous staircase tourists had stared at for decades but never climbed. The air upstairs felt stiller. Dust particles floated in shafts of light filtering through curtains that had not been drawn in years. They found Elvis's bedroom, his bathroom, personal items untouched since that August day in 1977. Everything looked exactly as expected based on estate records and historical accounts. Then they reached a narrow door at the end of a hallway. Staff records did not mention this room. Floor plans from the 1970s showed it as a storage closet, rarely used. The door opened with resistance, hinges protesting. Inside was not a closet. It was a small room, maybe 10 by 12 feet, that looked like it had not been part of Graceland's normal existence. Broken furniture, overturned chairs, scattered papers everywhere. And dolls. Dozens of porcelain dolls arranged in strange patterns across the floor. Some sat in circles, others lined the walls, faces chipped and cracked. Several showed burn marks. The scene felt deliberately staged, like someone had been using this space for purposes nobody could immediately understand. Investigators began cataloging everything. The papers told the first part of the story: handwritten notes, typed letters, threats scrawled in red ink. "You can't hide from this debt. The king is dead. The house is ours. Your mother's signature means nothing now." Some were addressed to Riley, others to Lisa Marie, written before her death. The dates suggested this had been going on for years. There were mock legal documents too, practice versions of the foreclosure papers Findley eventually filed. Multiple drafts of forged signatures, each one slightly different, like someone perfecting a skill over time. Estate valuations, lists of artifacts inside Graceland, schedules tracking when the mansion was most vulnerable to exploitation. Then investigators found the USB drive, wedged beneath a loose floorboard, covered in dust but functional. They took it back to the field office and opened it with forensic software. What they found was comprehensive. Files labeled by year, going back half a decade. Forged deeds, fake loan agreements, correspondence templates designed to look official. One folder was titled Collapse Plan. It outlined exactly how to execute a rapid foreclosure sale during the confusion following a family death. Another contained spreadsheets tracking Graceland's financial history, visitor numbers, revenue estimates. Someone had studied this estate with obsessive detail. The digital evidence matched Findley's handwriting on the physical documents. Her fingerprints were on some of the papers. But that still did not answer the central question: how did she access this room? Graceland's security was tight. Staff were vetted carefully. The second floor had been off-limits for decades. Investigators interviewed everyone who had worked at the estate over the past 10 years. Maintenance crews, tour guides, administrative staff. Eventually, a pattern emerged. 5 years earlier, during renovations to the mansion's exterior, a contractor had been hired for masonry work. The company was legitimate, but one of their subcontractors raised flags. Records showed this person had accessed areas beyond their work scope. Security logs noted unusual entries to parts of the house that did not need repairs. When investigators tracked down the subcontractor, they discovered it was Findlay using a different name. She had obtained credentials through her old notary connections, created a fake work history, and embedded herself in the renovation project. That access gave her everything. Time inside Graceland unsupervised, opportunity to study the layout, ability to plant documents and create her hidden workspace. She had spent months preparing, gathering information, building the foundation for a scheme she would not execute until years later. The audacity was staggering. She set up an office inside Elvis Presley's home to plot stealing it. When confronted with this evidence, Findlay accepted a plea deal. She was sentenced to 4 years and 9 months in federal prison, plus 3 years of probation. Judge John Fowlkes made clear during sentencing that her actions represented more than fraud. They were an assault on American cultural heritage. Riley stood outside the courthouse afterward, surrounded by reporters. She did not say much. She only said that Graceland was safe now, and her family could finally move forward. The hidden room upstairs has been sealed permanently. Its contents were cataloged as evidence and then destroyed. Graceland reopened to the public weeks later with enhanced security protocols. New procedures now govern vetting anyone who works on the property. Digital monitoring systems were installed throughout areas previously considered secure by their secrecy alone. The Presley legacy, threatened by greed and deception, survived because one woman refused to accept a lie. Riley did not just inherit a mansion. She inherited a responsibility, and she fulfilled it completely. The FBI 600-page file on Graceland tells 2 stories. One is about a legendary entertainer whose life ended surrounded by prescription bottles and undiagnosed illness. The other is about a criminal who nearly stole that history through forgery and lies. What federal investigators found inside those walls was not just evidence of fraud. It was proof that some legacies are worth fighting for, no matter the cost.